Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has called on the international community to stop India from its reckless and militarist agenda. In a series of tweets, Khan said the Indian media has also revealed its government's dirty nexus that is pushing the region towards a conflict. He said Prime Minister Modi's government continues to turn India into a rogue state. Pakistan's army says security forces have killed 2 terrorists during an intelligence-based operation in South Waziristan. The military's media wing says another terrorist was injured during the operation and apprehended. The ISPR says the terrorists were active members of the TTP's Sajna group and were involved in attacks on security forces. The Afghan government says its troops have killed 25 Taliban fighters in a preemptive operation in southern Kandahar province. The Defense Ministry said 8 others were wounded in the raid. A Taliban spokesperson said 2 soldiers were killed and as many wounded in the clash. The world has called for the immediate release of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny, who was detained on arrival in Moscow from Germany. European Council President Charles Michel said the detainment of Navalny is unacceptable, while the US said the perpetrators of the attack on his life must be held accountable. Moscow accuses Navalny of breaching the terms of a suspended prison sentence for fraud and can be jailed for up to 3.5 years. The number of global coronavirus infections has crossed 95 million, with over 2 million deaths. The US's COVID-19 death tally is approaching 400,000, while its caseload is nearing 24 million. Pakistan has registered over 1,900 new cases and 46 fatalities overnight as the death toll approaches 11,000. And in cricket, Australia have set a target of 328 runs to win the 4th Test match and the series against India in Brisbane. India were at 4 for no loss in their chase when rain brought an end to play after tea. Earlier, medium pacer Mohammad Siraj's 5 wickets helped India dismiss the Aussies for 294. These were the headlines. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Let's have the news in detail. We start from Pakistan, where the Prime Minister Imran Khan has called on the international community to stop India from its reckless and militarist agenda before it pushes the region into an irrepressible conflict. In a series of tweets, Khan said the Indian media has also revealed its government's dirty nexus that is pushing the region towards a conflict. He said Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government continues to turn India into a rogue state. The Prime Minister said Indian-sponsored terrorism in Pakistan, its abuses in Kashmir, as well as the EU Disinfo Lab revelations have exposed India. Khan said he had already spoken at the UN General Assembly on how Modi's government used the Balakot crisis for an election win. He pledged to continue to expose Modi's fascist regime and India's belligerent designs against Pakistan. Meanwhile, Pakistan's security forces have killed 2 terrorists in northwestern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. The terrorists were killed during an intelligence-based operation in South Waziristan district of the province. In a statement, the military's media wing said another terrorist was wounded during intense fire and arrested. The ISPR said the terrorists were active members of the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan Sajna group. It also said they were IED experts, terrorist trainers, motivators, and were involved in attacks on Pakistan's security forces. Terrorist Usman was also involved in the attack on security forces on the 14th of October 2020. Captain Umar Chima, 2 junior commissioned officers and 3 soldiers were martyred in the attack while 4 others were injured. Pakistan's foreign minister says India has been further exposed with its journalists' leaked chats revealing shocking new low. In a tweet, Shah Mahmood Qureshi said India's rogue regime can go to any length to get and stay in power. Qureshi said India endangered regional peace through false flag operations and by its unholy BJP crony media nexus. The foreign minister added the Indian media itself has unearthed the sinister designs of the enemy country against Pakistan. Qureshi said Islamabad had already rejected the Pulwama incident framed by India to malign Pakistan. He continued to say that India is also using Afghan soil against Pakistan, which has taken up the issue with the Afghan administration. Meanwhile, the Afghan government says its troops have killed 25 Taliban fighters in a preemptive operation in southern Kandahar province. The Defense Ministry said 8 others were wounded in the raid. The ministry said the raids were carried out in the Zehriya and Arghandab districts of the province. It said 8 others were wounded in the raids, while a large amount of ammunition and weapons was also destroyed. A Taliban spokesperson said 2 soldiers were killed and as many wounded in the clash. Now, the Taliban say they have assured the United Nations of their full cooperation regarding the vaccination process in Afghanistan. A Taliban spokesperson said the chief of political office in Qatar, Mullah Baradar Ahmad, met with the heads of the UN, WHO and UNICEF for Asia. He said the 2 sides discussed vaccines, treatment for coronavirus and other infectious diseases, including polio, in Afghanistan. The spokesperson said the Taliban considers it their responsibility to provide health services to the people of Afghanistan. Now, Russia has slammed U.S. President-elect Joe Biden's top aide, Jake Sullivan's claim of arresting the opposition leader, Alexei Navalny. In a social media post, Russia's foreign ministry spokesperson said the criticizing officials should deal with their domestic problems first. Maria Zakharova said the officials and states issuing prepared comments should respect Russia's sovereignty and international law. Earlier, many European states and the U.S. called on Russia for the immediate release of Navalny. Russian capital's prison service said it would do everything to arrest Navalny once he returned. They accuse him of breaching the terms of a suspended prison sentence for fraud and can be jailed for up to 3.5 years. Moving on now, China says it will sanction U.S. officials who engage in what it calls nasty behavior over Taiwan. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Hua Chunying made the announcement in a daily press briefing. Hua said Washington's continued disregard for the One China policy triggered Beijing's response. This comes after Washington lifted curbs on exchanges between U.S. and Taiwanese officials. Earlier, China announced sanctions on U.S. companies selling weapons to Taiwan. China considers Taiwan its province and has warned Washington of dangerous consequences for the provocations. The relations between the U.S. and China are strained over a host of issues, including Taiwan, Hong Kong, Xinjiang, and the coronavirus pandemic. Now, Israeli warplanes have launched multiple attacks in the southern Gaza Strip. Israeli defense forces say the raids were carried out in response to 2 rockets fired from north of the Gaza Strip. The IDF said its fighter jets struck military targets belonging to Hamas. Witnesses say the strikes completely destroyed certain buildings, including private property in Rafah city. They also said the Israeli military vehicles infiltrated the borders from east of the city and ravaged agricultural lands. Moving on, 40 Houthi rebels and 2 soldiers have been killed in clashes in western Yemen's Al-Hudaydah province. In a statement, Yemeni military said 55 rebels and 10 soldiers were also wounded during the fighting in the Hais and Ad-Durayhimi districts. It added the clashes erupted after Houthis attempted to breach the front line of government forces in the districts. It said Houthis' attacks in Al-Hudaydah have undermined the work carried out by UN to establish peace in the city. Earlier, a Houthi attack injured 3 people, including 2 children, in Saudi Arabia's southern Jaein city. Meanwhile, in another event, the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen intercepted 3 bomb-laden drones launched by Houthis towards the kingdom. Now, Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif has denounced the American bombers patrolling the Middle East. He warned the U.S. president that Iran has not started a war in over 200 years, but it won't shy from crushing aggressors. In his tweet, Zarif said the U.S. should spend those billions of dollars on its taxpayers' health instead of trying to intimidate Iran. Earlier, the United States Central Command announced that B-52 bomber aircraft had conducted a patrol in the Middle East. 2 U.S. B-52s were also spotted in Israeli airspace heading towards the Persian Gulf. Now, Iran's central bank has criticized the European Union's payment channel designed to allow European companies to avoid U.S. sanctions. In a tweet, the bank portrayed the instrument in support of trade exchanges as useless, saying its operations are under the influence of sanctions. It said the UK, France and Germany do not have the courage to maintain their economic sovereignty. The bank said Iran will not divert its resources to INX tax anymore, as the European states have no idea how to finance the channel. This came after Germany blamed Iran for the failure of the EU-initiated payment system. The INSTEX mechanism was set up by France, Germany and Britain in January 2019 to facilitate trade with Iran by avoiding the US sanctions. Meanwhile, rescuers say 12 miners trapped underground after an explosion in a Chinese gold mine a week ago are still alive. State media said the workers managed to send a note to rescuers 7 days after the accident in eastern Shandong province. The note said 12 people were alive in the middle section of the mine, while the fate of 10 others was still unclear. According to state media, the rescuers made contact with some of the miners through a narrow shaft. Rescue teams were drilling several rescue shafts in the hope the workers can be evacuated. They sent food, medicine, paper and pencils into the hole after they felt pulling on the ropes they lowered into the mine. The explosion damaged the exit and communication system of the mine, which was still under construction. Now, small groups of protesters, some of whom were armed, gathered at state houses across the United States. Many state houses remained quiet amid a ramping up of security across U.S. legislatures. Protests were held outside Capitol buildings in Texas, Oregon, Michigan, Ohio and elsewhere, but no clashes were reported. Many cities prepared for violent protests over the weekend, erecting barriers and deploying thousands of National Guard troops. The deployments came amid FBI warnings of armed protests ahead of Wednesday's inauguration. Talking to the media, Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy said all Guard members were also being vetted due to fears of an insider threat. More news coming up in this bulletin after a short break. Stay with us. And welcome back now. The number of global coronavirus infections has crossed 95 million, with over 2 million deaths toll. The US COVID-19 death tally is approaching 400,000, while its caseload is nearing 24 million. More on the coronavirus in this report.
The cases, hospitalizations and deaths from the coronavirus have reached record highs as the world endures its darkest chapter of the pandemic yet. In the US, nearly 1 year since the first known coronavirus case was detected, the full extent of the nation's failure against the virus have come into clear view. The uncertainty over the availability of the vaccine's second doses keep building in the country, while the officials downplay the speculations as misunderstanding. Meanwhile, Brazil has approved Oxford's AstraZeneca and China's Sinovac vaccines amid doubts over the efficacy of the Russian Sputnik. Venezuela has sent a convoy of trucks carrying emergency oxygen supplies for Brazil's northern Amazon state, where second wave has hit hard.
El convoy The convoy going to Brazil in solidarity with the people of Amazonas is made up of 6 trucks with a total of 136,000 liters of oxygen, equivalent to 14,000 individual canisters. Early in the morning, we will be crossing La Linea, the border with Brazil, at the Santa Helena de Jaein customs to deliver the cargo to Brazilian health authorities and to continue towards Manaus, where it is estimated it may arrive 14 hours later.
Over in Europe, all UK travel corridors which allow arrivals from some countries to avoid having to quarantine have now closed till February 15. Dutch riot police used water cannons to try to disperse protesters against national lockdown, which attracted thousands of people to central Amsterdam. In Spain, nursing homes residents are among the first people to receive the second dose of the BioNTech Pfizer coronavirus vaccines. Meanwhile, cases continue to rise in China as well, where authorities say most of the cases are imported.
At present, there are mainly 2 regions where the epidemic situation is relatively serious. One is Hubei province, with the cities of Xizangtiang and Xintai as the epicenters. The number of corona cases is still increasing at the moment there. The other is Northeast China province, especially the province of Heilongjiang, where Xinhua city is the epicenter. In addition, there are small clusters of cases in the other places which were caused by other traveling out of those 2 regions.
Australia's New South Wales has urged the residents to get tested after 6 new cases of community transmission were recorded in the state. India has reported 447 cases of adverse event following immunization and 3 hospitalizations a day after it kicked off its vaccination drive.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 46 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. This takes the country's death toll to over 10,997. Health officials reported 1,920 new infections overnight. Meanwhile, more than 34,000 active COVID-19 cases have been detected in the country. The Health Ministry says out of over 521,000 countrywide cases, more than 475,000 people have recovered. Meanwhile, the schools have reopened today for the students of grades 9 to 12 after almost 2 months of closure. South Korean President Moon Jae-in says U.S. President-elect Joe Biden should resume talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. In a news conference, Moon said Biden's inauguration will provide a turning point to restart the stalled talks. He said Seoul will seek an early chance to promote Pyongyang as Biden's foreign policy priority. Moon added talks can pick up pace if they follow through on an agreement reached by Trump and Kim at Singapore summit. The 2 leaders vowed to establish new relations and work towards denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, but their second summit and ensuing working-level talks fell apart.
The inauguration of the Biden administration would provide a turning point to newly start the U.S.-North Korea dialogue, the South-North dialogue, to inherit the achievements that were made under the Trump administration.
Referring to Kim's pledge to beef up nuclear capabilities, Moon said it highlighted the need to resume talks. Now moving on, a state of emergency has been declared in Sudan's West Darfur state as the death toll in ethnic clashes rises to 83. In a statement, medics said the number of wounded people has also risen to 160 in 2 days' clashes between Arabs and non-Arab militias. Sudan Sovereign Council has announced to send security reinforcements to the state to protect citizens and vital utilities there. Meanwhile, a round-the-clock curfew is also imposed in the state after the deadliest violence since a peace agreement was signed in October. After the peace agreement, the joint UN-African Union peacekeeping mission started to withdraw its staff from the country. In Indonesia, death toll from the strong earthquake and floods in the central parts of Indonesia has risen to 96. The quake had displaced nearly 70,000 people who were forced to flee home and take shelter. Disaster Mitigation Agency spokesman said more than 250 others have been seriously injured after the 6.2 magnitude quake. Meanwhile, in South Kalimantan province, at least 15 people have died following weeks of torrential rains and flash floods. The world's 4th most populous country also suffered a plane crash on January 9th that killed 62 people. On top of that, a deadly landslide in Java has killed 29 people after the Merapi and Semeru volcanoes erupted. Egypt has unveiled a significant new archaeological discovery of 54 wooden coffins at the Saqqara necropolis south of Cairo. Many of the coffins can be traced back to 3,000 years to the New Kingdom period. Let's find out more in this report.
The discovery of ancient wooden coffins in Egypt can rewrite the history of the New Kingdom period, which spans about 1539 to 1075 BC. According to archaeologist Zahi Hawass, the funerary temple of Queen Neat was also discovered near the pyramid of her husband, King Teti of Egypt's 6th dynasty, which dates back 4,200 years.
The major important discovery also, we found 22 shafts. Inside the shafts were coffins and mummies. In one shaft, 54 coffins. Inside the shafts, unique artifacts. We found a papyri about 5 meters long. We found major statuettes. We found games that the Egyptian played. We found also many unique artifacts such as an axe belonging to a soldier. All this discovery will rewrite the history of Saqqara in the New Kingdom.
The discovery showed finely painted sarcophagi as well as a collection of colored wooden statues, ancient games and masks.
We extract the coffins, and the most important thing in extracting coffins is to study them in order to add a new piece of information to Egypt's ancient history. We add linguistic information or something about how the coffins were made.
Officials are keen to show off newly discovered artifacts as they try to revive visitors after the tourism industry received a painful blow during the coronavirus pandemic.
Now, China's latest official figures have confirmed it was the only major economy to see growth in the pandemic-hit year 2020. Data from the National Bureau of Statistics shows a fourth quarter growth of 6.5% from a year earlier. The GDP growth beat forecasts of 6.1% following a 4.9% expansion in the third quarter. According to NBS data, the world's second largest economy grew by 2.3% in COVID-stricken 2020. Beijing's industrial output also rose to a faster than expected rate of 7.3% in December from a year ago. It expanded for the 9th straight month as the vast manufacturing sector continues its post-COVID recovery. December's retail sales also as of 4.6% from a year earlier, missing forecast for 5.5% growth. Meanwhile, European stocks are trading just under the flat line as unprecedented coronavirus surge weighs down investor sentiment. The CAC 40 in Paris is leading the losses, shedding close to 0.5%. The Pan-European Stock 600, Frankfurt DAX, London's FTSE and Italy's FTSE MIB have also slipped fractionally. Earlier, Asian stocks traded mixed, with mainland Chinese and Hong Kong's Hang Seng gaining, while other regional bourses shed. And now let's have a look at the weather updates. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.